jungle, but the garden is Eden. Yeah, where one poster can hang you with a great speed, where you can run up on whoever has an 8 seed, or freeze up South Beach from off the line.
Okay, good to go. All right, here we go. Salute to Knicks Nation on this Wednesday live edition of Knicks Fan TV. CP the Fanchise here. A special edition of Knicks Fan TV. Unfortunately, it was announced on Tuesday the untimely passing of Michael Ray Richardson at the age of 70 years old. So, as is always the case on Knicks Fan TV, we always want to give these legends their flowers, and we do it with none other than the legend himself, the rhyme animal Chuck D, in the building. And also joining us today on short notice, thank God he was able to join us here, co-wrote a book with Michael Ray Richardson called Banned. It was called Banned, How I Squandered an All-Star NBA Career Before Finding My Redemption. Co-written with Michael Ray Richardson, and joining us today is Jake Uitti. So hit the like button, hit the share button, and subscribe to the channel. And hey, if you guys are fans from the Michael Ray Richardson Knick days, call us up on the KFTV Discord and chime in and share your Sugar Ray stories. Okay. All right, gentlemen, thanks again for joining us today. Chuck, how you feel? How did you feel when you heard the news of the passing of Michael Ray?
Yeah, it was one of those things that, and thanks for inviting me on, CP. One of those things that bring back a bittersweet feeling, because I felt that growing up in the 70s and following it as a young man in my late teens and then going in the 80s, in my 20s, I felt that my sports enthusiasm was robbed by the streets of New York, which was a rough, crazy place. As you know it just from hip hop. What came through the streets and just dismembered athletes that came in to play for the Knicks, the Mets, the Yanks, the Jets, the Giants, and New York was hard. And Michael Ray Richardson was one of my favorites, and he was one of the first casualties that I saw that got banned from the NBA. When we're like, although he got traded from the Knicks, but you still wanted to watch the man play. You still rooted for the man. And he just couldn't cross that hurdle. And so that's what the first thing that reminded me is like one of those what could have been. Same thing with like Darryl Strawberry and Doc Gooden. So, yeah, that's what first hit me. And then, of course, that coming a day after Lenny Wilkens, it was just like, okay, just ironic.
And Jake, you've written a number of publications, and you've also written numerous books. How did you connect with Michael Ray Richardson on this project? What motivated or inspired you to work on this project with him?
Yeah, it was just one of those great words of mouth things, and thank you for having me on the show, CP. I did a book with Muggsy Bogues, and that led to a book with Earl Curitan, and that led to a book with Michael Ray, and it was just friends sort of recommending me to these guys to help tell their story, which is what I love to do. And I especially love to do it with people who might need a book to come out to sort of change the narrative, right? Because it's so easy in today's culture to hear someone was banned from the NBA for drugs and just assume that's who they are. And with Michael Ray's case, that was 3, 4, maybe 5 years of his life. He lived to 70. There's 65 other years there to talk about. Right. And it's so easy for... he was definitely involved in drugs, but the phrase like the lie travels around the world forever, or the gossip travels around the world forever, however you want to look at it. And so I really wanted to work with Michael Ray and tell his story. And in so doing, I, got a close friend, one of the nicest people in the world that I've ever met. And the thing that I always think about with Michael Ray, he told me, if I have a dime, you have a nickel. And I think that's exactly who he is.
Yeah, and that's why I like to kind of have these look backs and to tell the full story of an individual, because I think a lot of times, especially when we look at public figures, a lot of times we look at them based on their lowest of lows, their highest of highs at times, but also their lowest of lows. And the reality is that we live complicated lives as human beings, right? And so that's why I feel like it's important to have guys like you guys on to really show the other side of who this guy was. And for Chuck, man, in those early 80s and the late 70s when he was drafted by the Knicks, the talent, because a lot of people did not know who this talent was, Sugar Ray Richardson.
Yeah, it comes out of Denver, goes to Montana, tore up the Big Sky Conference. Me and my guys grew up in Roosevelt, Long Island, but we followed sports like young people follow sports today. We'll pick up the street in Smiths. We'll follow a bead. Oh, man, we found out that the Knicks is going to draft Ray Williams, but not Ray Williams out of nowhere. Ray Williams that comes from Mount Vernon, who also played at Minnesota. So we follow in the bead. So we also saw when the Knicks picked up Michael Ray Richardson, we knew where he was from, Denver, played in the Big Sky Conference. First season as a Knick was a disaster. I think he came, Willis Reed drafted him.
Yeah.
It was a disaster. But the next season, it seemed like he and Ray Williams found this camaraderie. And then they had this young Knick team. They had Mike Woodson coming in late on, Sly Williams.
Mm-hmm.
And that young Knicks team was buoyed by Sugar Ray Richardson finding his game. And when you looked at Richardson that next year, there was a player that came in that was the number 1 draft pick that had the same style. And that was Magic Johnson. And we already had one of these guys.
And the same coach. Amazingly, the guy from Montana went to Michigan State, and they coached both of them. Yeah,
Judd Heathcote.
That's
Yeah.
right, and won a championship with Magic. Yeah,
For sure. And I had one of my guys, Pastor Michael A. Waldron. He's a pastor of First Corinthian Baptist Church up in Harlem, and from the Velt, Chuck. And he said, look, Michael Ray was Magic before Magic. Like, he had it all, the size, the passing, the vision, the charisma. Like, he just had that. And even Magic would say, hey, this was one guy that I thought was most like me.
Willis Reed let those guys go. Those are Ray Williams and Michael Ray Richardson was the first backcourt. I don't know if this means statistically as anything, but aesthetically for the game, for us New Yorkers to watch, it's the first backcourt that threw alley-oops to each other.
amazing.
Absolutely. And Jake, in your conversations with Michael and doing the research on the book, what was that wow moment that you learned about him as a player?
Oh man, there was quite a bit. Like you said, his first year was tough because Willis Reed drafted him, and then but Willis Reed was fired shortly thereafter. So Red Holtzman, this sort of old guard who'd won championships in the 70s, didn't trust him with the car keys. But then going into the next year, he did, and you just saw Michael flourish. And you get to see Michael flourish before the drugs, right? Like he talks about it, and he didn't drink a drop of alcohol in college. You know, how many of us who went to college didn't have a beer, and Michael didn't. He was social, people liked him, but he didn't get into any of that stuff. And it was sort of a cascading death by paper cuts that got him involved in drugs, and is actually the mover who moved him from one apartment to the other, going from New Jersey to New York. His brother was the person who, so it's this sort of domino effect. But seeing Michael, the pure player, those 3 years when he was sort of let loose, leading the league in assists and steals and just being a dynamo on the court at a really difficult time for the Knicks, right? The 70s were done. Clyde Frazier was being traded.
Yeah.
Spencer Haywood and Bob McAdoo were there, but they kind of weren't. Bill Cartwright was traded soon. It was this transitional phase, and Michael Ray was supposed to be the guy, and in many ways he was until he wasn't. But the thing that stands out about Michael more than even his playing days is just his attitude. You know, he did not hold a grudge against the NBA. He did not hold a grudge against David Stern. He did not hate anybody. You know, and he said all this stuff saved his life. So there's so much about him and his sort of effervescence that stands out, along with his great defense and scoring ability and double-digit assists and Knicks prowess.
And Chuck, you smiled when Jake listed those names in that transition phase in those early 80s, moving from the Clyde and Willis days. And they had the talent. They had the names of McAdoo, Spencer Haywood. They tried to get Jabbar. Like, what did you see as a kid growing up in those early, those late 70s, early 80s teams?
As we were trying to find ourselves at the Knicks, there was tough oppositions. You had Dr. J down there in Philly. They went through the transition of the super, carnival type squad. And then when they got Bobby Jones, they really solidified themselves into a monster. So you couldn't get past Philly. Then you had the Bullets then, and down in DC, and they had just, went to the championship twice. So that Knicks teams in that area, we couldn't get past teams like you had the Bucks. So they were very powerful teams in the Eastern Conference. And I ain't even said the Celtics. So I'm just saying, like, once the Celtics got burned, then that made that top four almost impenetrable. And so we got off seeing developing seeds and hope that we get a style in there. Because one style that wasn't going to work anymore, CP and Jake, was going out and buying superstars. And that wasn't going to work for it. New York's a different place. And at that time, Richardson comes in as a rookie. Ray Williams already kind of knew what New York, he's from Mount Vernon. But this guy's coming from Denver. And you come to New York City, even now, it will melt you, especially back then. It was snowing 13 months out of the year. So it's snowing everywhere. So going to Studio 54, where they used to have promotional parties for artists, and the promotional parties for some artists was like a foot-long line of cocaine. So once you start mixing into that whole paparazzi, the club scene, remember, all these things are still happening in New York City at that time. It was an easy invitation into something else outside of the game. And it wasn't always good because as a rookie and as a ball player, you still might not think you green. You green as super green coming to New York in your 20s. And everybody's in 30s, 40s, running the game, waiting for you to come in because you got money. And that's how they got a lot of those guys. That's how a lot of the young guys got in the late 70s and the early 80s.
Chuck mentioned Green. Sugar talked when he flew into New York for the first time with his mom. He was like, "Where are the trees?" He didn't know where the trees were. So that was his line coming in. And Chuck knows this. I'm sure hearing this from stories and stuff. This stuff wasn't just with athletes too, right? Like we make clear in the book, and it's important for me to say and for everybody to know that this is entertainers, this is comedians, this is musicians, disco, Caddyshack, and athletes in New York, people in New York were caught up in the middle of it. So this was everywhere. Cocaine was everywhere, and it was everywhere in entertainment. And it wasn't thought about being awful yet. Yeah.
And let me tell you, that, when people look up things and they try to tell me how it was and how it is, I got my first job in the city on 3rd Avenue in 1976 at 16, traveling from Roosevelt. I was 20 in 1980. So all this talk about how it was back then, they pour a myth on it. They try to say this wasn't there. And I'm looking and staring at them like, dog, I'm here now talking to you. And I was there.
You were there.
And I didn't smoke. I didn't drink. I didn't do any of that. I was a guy that tried to be a whack athlete. I wasn't good at all. But I knew if I touched anything, I'd be worse. And I was a designated driver. And I was in music where there was pounds and piles of everything everywhere. So I was very much focused on seeing and watching and listening to everything. And being a sports fanatic, we knew when somebody was like, oh man, page 6 of the Post. Oh, they're at Studio 54. They happened to get in. Because number one, if you was black, you wasn't even getting on that block. So you had to be a celebrity to get in that club. And what went on in all those places, it's like, it was social life. The social life was
there's different floors. Each floor had its own thing.
Yeah. David Thompson. I think David Thompson saw his end in Studio 54 because he got drunk or hot or whatever and fell down a flight of stairs, ruptured his knee. So all she wrote. New York there's no place on the planet Earth like New York City. And people, it's so compressed, people wait for people to come in. So you green automatically, even if you are from New York, because we traded Sugar and got Bernard King. And the first time Bernard King came to the New York City area as a pro, he played for the Jersey Nets, CP.
That's right.
And he couldn't handle it. It was just so much. He's back around the way. Everybody's like, well, they couldn't sell it up, but they payphoned it up or whatever. And he's in Jersey, and he had to get out of here to come back. And we traded Sugar for Bernard King. We traded him to the Warriors and got Bernard King. And so it was like one of those things. So as a fan, and not to make a long story out of it, you're kind of following the ball player, but also the minefield that they're ducking and dodging and and kind of submersed in playing in New York. It was a tricky time. You know, it was a different time. It wasn't like playing in Pittsburgh for the Condors. It wasn't like, you know, playing for the Kansas City Omaha Kings. This is New York Knickerbocker basketball playing in the same building that they're playing today.
Yeah.
The league was hiring private detectives for players and watching people in LA and New York and things like that at the time. Yeah.
That's incredible. One of the early scandals during the David Stern era.
Yeah. Stern, the sort of the 3-strike process. Sugar had a couple more than that throughout his career, and he was late to a lot of games, and he would kind of get holed up in hotels for spells on end. But eventually, Stern had to make an example of somebody, and it ended up being Sugar. And, you know, he tells a story of someone walking up to him in an airport, and that was kind of the darkest moment of his career because he kind of knew that a big chapter had ended, you know, and he was in big trouble. But like I said, he never held a grudge against Stern, and in fact said that decision saved his life. You know, and that's the kind of recovery you want to come from a punishment, you know, or a reprimand or whatever. You know, that's the kind of result you want. And Sugar lived 50 more years or whatever it is. And you know, someone said on Twitter, and I agree with it, the measure of a person, their children, you know, he's got a doctor for a child. He's got a professional soccer player as a child. So it is looked at like the NBA killed his career or, you know, guillotined him, but it was actually a really great thing. And speaking to the idea of like the gossip goes around faster, Sugar was also the first person ever reinstated into the NBA after a lifetime ban. And it came a year after he, you know, served his penance or whatever. And so he was allowed to play in the NBA and actually got an offer to come back to the NBA to the Sixers, and, you know, which the team sort of has disputed throughout history or whatever, but it never got signed because Sugar says he wanted a second year guaranteed and they would only offer him one. So he stayed in Europe and he was happy to do so.
And he took the Sixers down the year after he won the championship. The Nets beat
84.
the Sixers. Yeah, three games or 2 in a 5-game series, and Richardson took them down. Moses and everybody.
That's right.
They couldn't believe it. This guy coming back, and I'm telling you, talking about his game, it was just relentless. It was relentless. He was a 6'5", you know, strength. He could rebound, pass the ball, you know, race to the court, dunk it. He was doing it all. It was just breakneck speed. The problem is like, who's going to coach that after Red, and how does everybody else keep up with that? I thought that we won 50 games in 1980, 81 under Ray Holtzman. We lost to the Bulls, and then we lost Ray Williams. Ray Williams, I think, went to the Nets, which killed us, or he went to Kansas City. It was just, we lost Ray Williams, and that backcourt was gone. Sugar was just by himself I think they teamed him up with Mike Newland. It just wasn't the same, and we lost him to the streets at that time. But in retrospect, Sugar was one of those guys that helped build basketball around the world, like Starberry.
Yes.
But 30 years ago.
Well
built
said.
around the world. The beginning of my career, 87, we would travel to all these places and see the remnants of NBA players merging with European players and building the game abroad. So Ray built basketball around the world and doesn't get the credit. People like Eddie Johnson went over there and built the game. You know, a lot of those ball players went, and it wasn't a joke. Like, oh, you can't play in the NBA no more, so you got to play over there. No, these players went over there. They built the game and also got another layer of culture that they was able to bring back to the game in the United States as coaches and mentors.
Absolutely.
Well, once again, we're talking to the legend Chuck D, as well as author and writer Jake Uitti, remembering Michael Sugar Ray Richardson. Salute to everybody in the chat once again. Hit the like button, hit the share button, and subscribe to the channel. And Jake, in your discussions with Michael Ray, as you said, he took accountability for everything that happened to him. Did he ever pinpoint, you know, what was the driving force? I mean, obviously, drugs are super addictive, and as Chuck pointed out, going from the Midwest all the way to the bright lights in New York City in the 70s, 80s, I mean, that's a huge shock factor there. But it also seemed like the instability and the unpredictable nature of the business of the NBA, maybe that drove him back to those vices because, as Chuck said, the Knicks fired Willis Reed. They bring back Red Holtzman. Michael Ray Richardson, he's not happy with the change. He's traded from the Knicks to the Warriors. Didn't last very long, barely even made it off the plane there. So it kind of seemed like along the journey that, it's a tough business. It's a cold business. It seemed like that may have drove him to those vices. Did he ever talk about that?
It's a really good question, and I think it's hard to say now what the little, water droplets that turned into a wave were. I think Sugar has an addictive personality, and I think he was on top of the world, and he was getting offered stuff by everybody, including his neighbor. And it was the neighbor who was his friend, who was the brother of the person that I said, the sort of mover that moved him into his new apartment in New York City, that kept offering. And I think the friend was probably like, ooh, I have the New York Knicks starting point guard coming over. Like, I'm going to bring some friends. We're going to pass around a tray. Sugar, why don't you try? Everybody's got. And then I think he said no several times and no several times. And then, okay, I'll try it. And I'm remembering now as I'm speaking, the first time it didn't even work. And so he tried it again. And then it was like done. Then it was, I have addiction in my family. My dad was an alcoholic, and I had a half brother who passed away from various things. And that was one of the ways that Sugar and I bonded, or at least understood one another to a degree. We understand addiction to some degree. And I know how it can take hold of somebody and how it's a brain chemistry thing. So if your brain is like, we need this, I mean, the whole world's experiencing this right now. I live in Seattle. It's everywhere. People are addicted to drugs. And he succumbed to it, and it killed him, for a few years there, and killed his career. And Golden State was a mess. And the last year with the Knicks wasn't so great. And the first year or two with the Nets had up and down. And that's when he was eventually suspended. But he did beat the Sixers, the defending champ Sixers in '84. So he always had these like amazing flashes, and there were moments throughout those years where he was sober and he would go to rehab. And so I don't know if there was a cascading effect, I don't know if there was a single thing other than it was a cascading effect. And finally he tried it, and the chemistry in his brain just wanted it.
We talked about this before, CP. What do you do with the downtime? Right. There's a lot of downtime.
Especially sorry to interrupt you, especially after games, and the NBA has changed this. Before they would have flights at 6 a.m. to get everybody out of town. Now you have charter jets and you fly out usually after the game. But if you're jacked up after the game and you're hanging out with your friends, Sugar would tell me that during the layup lines, they would be like, who's the guy with the thing, or, in the city. And they would stay up all night and take the 6 a.m. flight out, and the NBA thankfully changed that. Yeah.
Wow. It's as you say, Chuck, fame is fleeting.
It's everlasting because you're going to be remembered by somebody somewhere. But you got to have a sense of who you are. But it's like the downtime is the major thing with the sports guys, where they could be focused on zero. They didn't think anybody's looking at them. And trust me, the game outside the game will get the gotten. So they see young guys coming in, and they see and smell money, just like the same thing today when people see that they could get money through Instagram accounts and DMs and stuff like that. The game is always out. In New York, the game is triple. So, just talking about, the game with that Richardson played, he was so influential in that time that we was able to catch him out. But he had a long career. Right. I mean, and it was diverse, and he coached and he played. I think he played to like 44 out there. And every time I would travel, it'd be like, oh man, damn, Ray is playing tonight, that type of thing. And he would be like 44, 45. And he, about 5 years older than me. But, I'm one of the biggest fans, so I keep track on what cats is doing around the world. I don't take it very lightly. So I don't think fame is fleeting. I think a career is longer than you are as an existing person, because somebody's always watching.
True indeed.
For good and for bad. Yeah.
Yeah, for good or bad. Yeah. So, hey, one thing to honor those Knicks teams, I like to see more of the uniform that I hated at first. The Knicks at the bottom with the big name on the back, and the best person that sported it in these modern times when they brought it back was Starberry.
Yeah,
Because you would see
yeah.
the three up there, the Knicks, and a big Marbury on the back. And they only toyed with those uniforms a couple of times. So I like to see those uniforms come back, paying homage to people like
sure.
Michael Ray Richardson. Because when you show a lot of Michael Ray Richardson in pictures as a Knick, it's usually in those uniforms.
Yeah, that is true. And Jake, in the title of the book, it talks about redemption. What do you think redemption meant to Michael in just given his whole journey?
Sobriety, I think, and trustworthiness. After he went to Europe and he won several championships and European League championships, and then eventually came back to America and coached in the minor leagues and various things like that. He was trustworthy again. He was a wild guy. He was loud on the sidelines and everything like that, but he was trustworthy as a person and as a family member, and he was sober. And he proved himself in basketball that he was a winner, many times over, both as a person on the sidelines and as a player. And I think all those things is what makes a human being, and that's why he has so many friends around the league and so many admirers still, and why his family is so great and his children are so successful, because he figured out what matters, And I think he kind of always knew his mother was great, his family was great growing up, but maybe he had to affirm it to himself, One of the first lines of the book is like, Sugar believed that all of our stories are written before we take our first step, and so he accepted that this was his journey and that this was his lot in life, and he found his redemption, his sobriety, his trustworthiness, and his success, and that's why he's getting honored at Knicks games. That's why maybe the greatest MC in the history is talking about him right now. That's why these things. It's because of Sugar's character and the redemption that he felt and the redemption that he expressed to the rest of the world.
Yeah, very, very well said. And another person that we lost this week was the legend Lenny Wilkens, who is also well established and famous there in Seattle.
Yeah.
How do you remember Lenny?
Well, he's the greatest Sonic ever, by a mile. Gary Payton and Sean Kemp as a duo, maybe rival Lenny kind of, but Lenny was a player. He was a player coach. And he was a coach, right? And he was on the sidelines for the Sonics Seoul championship in 1979, and he was there for one of two, or I guess two of the three finals appearances in 78 and 79, and then the later one, 96, obviously. But he's Mr. Sonic. His big lapels, his open shirt, his leather sport coat. Hanging around Seattle, he was accessible. He was at hockey games. He was at baseball games. He was at football games. He was the unofficial mayor of the city in many ways. You had everybody outpouring, when he passed away. People of all kinds, sports fans or just people who, cultural fans, musicians here in Seattle, just, Lenny Wilkens. And what was really great is he got a statue, I think maybe 6 months ago, in front of Climate Pledge Arena. And a lot of the times you don't get to see your own statue or your own accolades, but, he got to see that and have the whole city and basketball community remember him. So, he's the most important Sonic ever, and probably will be. Even if the team comes back, which I hope they do.
Yeah, Chuck. How about you? How do you remember Lenny Wilkens?
Well, he's actually like my parents' age, and so they remember him. He's a guy from Brooklyn. Then he went to Providence, and he came in and played with the St. Louis Hawks. So I would always get the feedback from my pops. Same age category.
Yeah,
had the same mannerisms. When I looked at Lenny Wilkens, it felt like he was like part of my mom's family and stuff like that. So because you could hear it in the type of accent that they all spoke. It was slightly different. In the 50s and the 60s, they're black, but they're New Yorkers. It's a melting pot, and they had this different tone. So every time I would hear him and think about, my mom and dad. They're born in the same category of years, 38, 39, or whatever. When I first saw him on the basketball court, when I first started to recognize the game, he was as a Sonic, just left the Hawks. And he was a player coach. And this is the thing I didn't get, and today it never happens. Probably people told me it never happened again. That a ball player could be a coach and still be on the court.
Yeah.
It wasn't just Lenny Wilkens. It was Lenny Wilkens. It was Al Addles from Newark. He was a coach. He was the player coach for the Warriors and a couple others. So it wasn't uncommon. somebody told me today it's impossible because you kind of like need 8 coaches and the one head coach.
Now you got 8.
But you had one player. He was a player coach and maybe 2 assistants, and they got the job done. Dave DeBush was a player coach at 24.
Yeah.
So either it was a
Tree Rollins.
Tree Rollins,
Tree Rollins.
And I think also the last player coach was Dave Cowens.
Yeah, Dave Cowens. Boston. Dave Cowens. Yep.
So you're like, what mind does it take to be on the court and still run the team? I think LeBron could probably do it.
Yeah, I think LeBron could do it. I think he could do it.
But real. So Lenny Wilkens, the playmaker. So when I see him, he was traded to Portland, but he wasn't the coach in Portland, I don't think. Then he went to the Cavaliers. But then, his career as a coach, I'd never seen so many players. I've never seen as many. Well, I'll reword this. There's so few players I've ever seen coming out of sports that get the respect of, he's a great man. I mean, it's crazy. Everybody in the NBA, he coached damn near almost half the team.
Yeah, half the league.
And no one had a bad thing to say about Lenny Wilkens. In high school, college, professional ranks, coaching, management, has all been like, that's a good man. I'm like, wow.
Yeah. And we had, Stephon Marbury came on last night. He said the same exact thing. I'm looking at tributes from Mark Price, Pat Doherty. Yeah. I mean, across the league, same thing. Respect was that common theme. And so he'll be surely missed. But, man, I mean, talk about decorated from as a player to a coach, winning championships, the dream team, third all-time regular season wins. Jake, as you said, he was alive to see his statue in Seattle. And so, talk about a guy who, did the most with his time here on Earth and left a lasting memory. So, yeah, definitely rest in peace to Lenny Wilkens for sure, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the thing about Lenny Wilkens, when he became a Knicks coach, you felt bad because you're like, okay, he's coming into the stew,
into the fire,
so to speak, into the fire.
Yeah.
But as organizations went, they found a different way to release themselves from Lenny instead of saying they fired Lenny Wilkens, right?
Yeah.
It was crazy. It was like, we don't want to use the words fire Lenny Wilkens.
He's too hallowed.
They gracefully, yeah.
We're going in a different direction.
Conscious uncoupling, yeah.
No, I remember when they signed him, and I was excited. I was like, I think this is the guy, with Steph here. I think this is the perfect coach for him and this team. And Steph said, hey, they did make the playoffs. They did make the playoffs under Lenny Wilkens that one year. Just Jason Kidd and those Nets were just too much to handle, especially in the East during that time. It was their time, but short-lived Knicks stint, but they did show some promise during that era, man. So I definitely appreciate Lenny Wilkens as a Knicks coach.
Yeah, it's one of those things that we talked about just briefly before. You might have a team like when Ray Williams and Richardson played with the Knicks, and wow, it looks like we got a good shot. And the same thing with Lenny Wilkens, look like we got a good shot. But there's always another team out there that's better than you.
Yeah.
Or could be better than you. You got to get past that. Like, wow, we look great on paper. Matter of fact, we get along. This should work until that game that you play against that team that's the monster.
Yep.
And you be like, wow, we got to figure out how to retool this. So, that's the fun about being a sports fan. That's also the great fun about being a fan right now. With you couldn't script this Knicks story better than it's been the last 5 years. We don't know what the end is going to be.
Right.
But it's come on, it's going to go up and up and up, stage by stage, brick by brick, getting closer to the thing. This is the thing that makes a franchise worth billions of dollars, because they got the fans hanging on to something that's a story.
Yeah.
And we got a heck of a good story right now, and we're just riding the roller coaster, good, bad, and ugly.
For sure. Jake, what's been your impressions of the Knicks?
The Knicks, I mean, they're the number one, the title favorite, at least in the East, and then you see OKC with Jalen Williams out, and your brain starts to turn. Say, well, if OKC missing their best player, how long is he out? There's no real update, because the West seems stronger, and OKC seems to be the team that's going to come out of it. If it's Denver that comes out of it, I would say New York has a good chance. They have a lot of size to throw at Jokic.
Yeah.
You wonder how the Knicks are going to handle coming from the top spot, from the top position. You know, last year was such a heartbreak.
It was.
I'm from New Jersey originally. I lived in New Jersey till 2007.
Nice.
I have the state tattooed on my arm here, and the Knicks are my first team. The Patrick Ewing Knicks, you know, John Starks and all those guys. So I have a part of my heart is always rooting for the orange and blue. But you wonder how they're going to be as a front runner, and then you wonder how they're going to do in the playoffs. I loved hearing there's a guy, Tim Bontemps with ESPN. He equated the Mike Brown hiring as like Joe Torre, and I thought that was brilliant. And I think that could be if that would be amazing.
That would be.
So I'm pulling for the Knicks. You know, can Brunson stay healthy? Can Cat stay out of foul trouble? Can the Knicks, get past the Pacers heartbreak? Just watching that game one was incredible, and you just couldn't another three.
Yeah.
But I think they have a great chance to make the final. I don't believe in Cleveland as much as I like
Me
Donovan
neither.
Mitchell. I think they got to trade one of those bigs for something else. But I think it's the Knicks. Unless some team, unless Joel Embiid becomes an MVP candidate at the end of the year and comes out of the playing game or a lower seed. But yeah,
How much do they embrace the Thunder out there in Seattle? How much do they embrace them?
0. Is there a negative answer? Is there negative 100? It was, dude. I had to be my own therapist during the playoffs last year. I was like, I love Shea. If Shea was in Seattle, he'd be my favorite human being. Everything he can do on the court, the GM is incredible, the coach is incredible, but I hate them. My body and my heart is hating
Just
this
not
organization.
there.
But I have to. It's not them. It's not their fault. It's don't hate. Hating is not good. Don't have that in your heart. So it's really hard, And I love the NBA, and I have a lot of gratitude for the NBA. And so when I write these books or do these articles, I have that in my heart as I'm working on these projects. But I also know that so many of my friends hate David Stern or dislike the NBA because of what happened, and you can trace it back and say it's Howard Schultz's fault, it's whoever's fault, and a lot of people have culpability, but it's hard to be an NBA fan in Seattle because the Sonics belong in the league, the gold and green belong in the league, and to not have had them for basically 20 years is really hard. And so I watch all games every night and on all that stuff, and I love it. But there is the juxtaposition and the disconnect of great, the OKC is the greatest team in the league, and maybe one of the greatest teams ever, and they're in the smallest market ever, and they just left Seattle, which has 10 billionaires on every corner. So I don't know. It's tough. It's tough. The whole thing's tough, but
They should be in that green and gold.
Don't have hate in your heart. Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, wait, hey, listen. I don't think there's a fan in Buffalo that's mad at the Clippers.
Yeah. Well,
Isn't that funny? Yeah, the Braves, man. Yeah. Bob McAdoo.
Yeah. That is true, man. That's true. Yeah. Jake, anything you have in the pipeline in terms of books or publications?
Yeah, actually, thank you for asking. Yesterday, I had a book with Michael Cooper come out and a book with Tim Hardaway come out. So
nice!
Wow.
Weird day to have 2 books come out and then have one of your friends pass away. Yesterday was a strange day, but yeah, those memoirs coming out, and then I got books coming out next year with Robert Parrish and Jason Terry.
Wow!
So
wow!
Fans can look
you were churning it out, man.
Churning it out, man.
And they must light up differently because you kind of pick another tier of athlete, like Earl Curitan and Muggsy Bogues. I mean. So they must really dig into your questions because, you're giving them some light in a time where, a lot of the fans have moved on to different places and keep bringing it back.
Yeah, because, basketball's the reason we're doing these stories, but the people are the stories, right? And Muggsy's a 101. He never won a championship, but to be 5'3" and average 10 and 10 in the 90s is insane.
Crazy, right?
Earl Curitan, his story, what is it? We all know Michael Jordan. What does it mean to scrape by and to have these 1-year contracts and to be traded midseason? And so I like these sort of other stories. And Michael Cooper was one of, besides Magic and Kareem, the only player that get all 5 rings in the '80s with the Showtime Lakers. And Jason Terry, 6th Man of the Year. And Tim Hardaway, we all know Tim Hardaway's story. And we all want a better world, and we have to believe in redemption and forgiveness if we're going to have that better world. And we know Tim Hardaway, the tragic comments that he made in 2007 about gay people. And, we wanted to tell his story. And just like Sugar, he shouldn't be remembered for a bad point in his life, he should be remembered for the complete story. And now he helped get bills passed in Florida and for marriage equality, and he's spoken out and gone to therapy for all that stuff, let alone his amazing career and the Heat Knicks matchups and all that stuff. And so those are the stories that I'm drawn to. Yeah, I mean, if Larry Bird or Steph Curry or whoever Wemby want to call me, then we're open to some of those stories too. But or Chuck D, when are we going to do our basketball book, Chuck?
Yeah.
I'm here.
The Knicks fandom, I think that would be an amazing story. The story of Chuck D's Knicks fandom, and from the first game to the Knicks championship in 2026.
Wow, it starts right here on KFTV.
Let's do it. Let's exchange info.
With the Grandmaster CP orchestrating.
That's right. Oh, man.
But yeah, so yeah. I don't know. I love the NBA and yeah, so a bunch of books. Thank you for asking.
Well, listen, man, those stories off the beaten path are always, unique stories as well. So we definitely appreciate that. And as they come out, keep me posted, man. We'll definitely bring you on and talk about it. And, Chuck, this summer I was following you on the world tour. Hey, what are you up to now? Are you resting? Because you don't rest, man. You're always on the grind. What's in the pipeline for you?
Man. Number one, I ain't rushing to get into next year. I'm taking it day by day, moment by moment. I don't admit to this, but I'm stressed as F right now.
Yeah.
I'm trying to close the first hip-hop art magazine called Rap Central Station, based in London. I got a 24-hour closing period. So, but when it comes out, it'll be the first magazine of its kind worldwide. You can find it in the Barnes & Nobles around everywhere, as well as the bookstores and all that. So we're closing it down right now, and anything else is, there might be a concert or two. I just played in front of about 70,000 people with Guns N' Roses in Mexico City, but I got to kind of do that as a side job. That's like my side job is concerts, because you can do that like, all right, let me get back to this damn magazine and book and illustrations and all that. So I don't know. What I do, my release, and you should also know this, Jake. My release and my therapy and my zone out time, it's like I'm in the mosh pit of KFTV with the good, bad, and ugly, especially when I can. And I have a battle with certain Knicks Nation fans. Like, okay, I think the Knicks are going to win 57 this year, 57-25. And one of my mosh pit partners, KG, keeps saying, but KG said 60, they're going to win 60. But last week he said 55. So he's got to get his thing together. I'm staying at 57 and making no playoff predictions. So that's what I do, Jake. I'm in the mosh pit. I don't make no big deal about me. It's like, yo, man, I'm there as a fan. That's all I am, and that's what it is.
Always here, and we have a lot of fun doing this, man. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to speak to you both.
This was another one. Jake, thanks again for coming on last minute, and thanks for replying to the tweet, just keeping us aware of the book. And so I thought it was perfect timing to bring you on. And as usual, we always have to have Chuck on for these remembrance pieces that we do. So we definitely appreciate you guys for the time. And everybody at home, we appreciate you guys for the time as well. All we ask is that you hit the like button, hit the share button, and subscribe to the channel. Remember that the show will also be available in audio podcast format, so no reason to miss it. Shout out to the replay gang. And for those of you watching live, we'll be back tonight for Knicks versus Magic post-game live. We'll see if the Knicks can make it 6 in a row. 8-0 at Madison Square Garden. They're off to a good start, so let's see how it goes. Thanks again, everybody, for tapping in, and we'll see you guys later tonight, man. Peace.